Welcome again. My name is Stu McKenzie. I'm the Science Manager with the Criminal Investigations and Network Analysis, or CINA Center, hosted here at George Mason University. Thanks for joining us as we continue our spring series on transnational organized crime. If you do have a question during the talk, please use the chat box in WebEx. CINA's director, Dr. Jim Jones, is kindly curating a question and answer session at the end of Dr. Dolliver's presentation. Please mark your calendars, by the way, for April 14th, when Mr. Jeffrey Hardy is presenting new insights on illicit trade and its impacts. To stay informed, please sign up for our mailing list. You can also find details about upcoming events and CINA's work with federal law enforcement and investigators on our website. Our distinguished speaker this afternoon is Dr. Diana Dolliver, who is very highly respected in both law enforcement and the academic communities for her work on cybersecurity, on digital forensics, cryptocurrency investigations, and many other important topics. She holds a PhD in criminology and justice policy from Northeastern University, and she serves as academic director for the Joint Electronic Crimes Task Force, which is a cutting-edge digital forensics lab run jointly by the University of Alabama and the University of Alabama Police Department. She's an expert in mobile device and vehicle forensics and serves as principal investigator for a CINA project on extracting cryptocurrency wallet information from mobile devices. Diana's kind of going to share some of her recent work with us this afternoon in a presentation entitled Cryptocurrencies and Criminal Investigations from Transaction to Seizure. Diana, wonderful to have you with us as always. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you're ready, I'm going to hand off to you now for your presentation.
Awesome. So thank you guys again for inviting me to come talk to you today. I'm really excited about this opportunity. And thank you too for the introduction. So again, my name is Dr. Dolliver, and as you heard, I wear a lot of different hats here at the University of Alabama, but also with the FBI. I serve as the task force officer assigned to the cyber squad. So the crypto world is one that I live in daily from an investigational standpoint, and then also from a research and teaching standpoint. So we actually have a brand new course that is dealing with cryptocurrency transaction analysis. It's a new partnership with Chainalysis. So we're really excited about that. So what I wanted to focus this talk on today was some of the critical elements of basically what investigators and financial fraud investigators need to know basically before starting an investigation or before kind of jumping into anything that deals with cryptocurrency. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the research and some of the findings and applications directly for law enforcement and for seizing cryptocurrencies. So I know today it's a quick talk. It's about 45 minutes long. It'll be a lot of information that's probably new to many of you. So if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to go into tons of detail. I can really talk about cryptocurrencies for hours and days on end. You can ask my students about that. So basically the key elements that investigators or anybody in the financial sector or just interested, what you need to know about cryptocurrencies really stem from essentially how you can obtain cryptocurrencies to how they can be stored. So there's different methods of storing cryptocurrencies, all the way to how these transactions can be investigated. There's many different types of cryptocurrencies that exist out there. So understanding the blockchain fundamentals for each particular cryptocurrency is really important to understand how you can trace transactions forward, what sort of information you can get from them, and so on and so forth. And then for law enforcement, we're interested in how can we seize the funds, so asset forfeiture. But also from a financial sector standpoint, not only on the criminal investigative side, it's important to be aware of potential risky behaviors that your customers might be engaging in, such as money laundering through cryptocurrencies, or just any sort of odd behavior that might trigger or warrant further investigation of those individuals. So we're seeing a lot of challenges in the field with regards to law enforcement at local, state, and federal levels. So this is something that's impacting law enforcement at all levels. It is not just a federal problem. But we know that, so for instance, when officers are executing search warrants, they're not able to necessarily identify key points that would point to the use of cryptocurrencies. So for instance, missing a seed phrase that's written down in a ledger, or not recognizing a hardware wallet, or perhaps even a paper wallet. So things like that are going unnoticed. And then also in the financial sector, there has been kind of a steep learning curve with regards to trying to better identify these risky customers and further understanding how their behavior could potentially impact, business at their institution. So different storage mediums are going unnoticed. Also, failure to recognize significant applications. So on your mobile devices, not too many people now. I just even talked about this in class yesterday with my digital forensic students. How we carry our phones with us everywhere. We're not going to necessarily carry a laptop with us. So we're going to have many different apps that we can store cryptocurrencies on our phones, and that was the focus of the CINA grant. So in keeping in mind all of these different elements, I wanted to at least start out with just some basic information so that we're all kind of on a similar playing field when it comes to terminology and things like that. But a good place to start if you are new to the crypto space or just interested in learning more about it is coinmarketcap.com. So it's just an open source website. And it's got a lot of market information. So if you're a market guru, you like watching, the equivalent of stocks in the crypto world, this is a great place to go. So you can look for new coins that are popping up. You can look for the market shares. So I checked this morning and Bitcoin is still king. It's, I think, at 60% of the market share right now. It was at about 66%, tends to fluctuate into the 60s over time. But especially from a law enforcement standpoint, where we're just starting to get law enforcement officers comfortable with Bitcoin and that sort of terminology, when you drop the hammer that there's almost 9,000 different types of cryptocurrency out there, they kind of glaze over. So my job and my goal is to try to make this as straightforward as possible to at least understand the basics of the cryptocurrency world, because it's not impossible by any means, but it sometimes can be a little bit intimidating. So understanding the difference between the terms cryptocurrency, fiat, and digital are really important. So fiat currency, we know, is just currency that's backed by a federal government. So the US dollar, the Russian ruble, the Canadian dollar. So this is our fiat currencies, they're stable. They give us confidence in the system. This is how we've operated for a long time. So the digital form of currency is just fiat in that digital medium. So think about platforms like Venmo, and Apple Pay and things like that. And then cryptocurrency is a whole different kind of ball of wax. So these are cryptographic digital assets. They're decentralized, so they're not backed by any government. They are not owned by anyone. So there is no Bitcoin LLC or Bitcoin Inc. There's not one person or even a group of people who are in charge of the blockchain or any blockchain. So it's controlled by no one. And so then this always begs the question, I get this from law enforcement and from students, is cryptocurrency real? Is it funny money? And so we can have that whole existential conversation another time, but we have to operate under the assumption that it is real. People do pay a lot of money for it. Bitcoin is worth $55,000 right now for one Bitcoin. And so you can think about it in terms of, why do baseball cards have value? People trade them and put value into it. So thinking about it from that standpoint, hopefully should clarify some of that. But we can definitely go into some rabbit holes with that question. And then also recognizing the difference between blockchains versus Bitcoin, because sometimes they are used incorrectly, interchangeably. And blockchains are simply just the underlying cryptographic foundation on which cryptocurrencies exist. So they literally are the building blocks for creating transactions, for verifying and validating transactions. And then those blocks are chained together, which hence, that's how we get the term blockchain. And so that forms that basis for any sort of cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin has a blockchain. We call that a native coin. Ether has the Ethereum blockchain, and so on and so forth. So all of these 9,000 cryptocurrencies that exist now, they do not all have their own blockchain. A lot of them are built off of, or kind of stem from, or are sort of related to, if you want to think about it in those terms, the Bitcoin blockchain, the Ether blockchain, or Ethereum blockchain rather. And so they kind of piggyback on some of these major blockchains. Blockchains are not just used for cryptocurrency. So that's a whole nother conversation we can have at a different time. But also some terminology to be aware of. So addresses, the difference between address and a wallet. So an address is essentially going to be, so when a transaction is completed, you're sending the money from one address to another. And so an address is going to have a public and private key pairing. And so the public key from that key pairing, or derived from that key pairing, is what you're going to give to someone if you want to receive money. So that public address is going to be the address that you can see on the blockchain, the address that you're going to give out so people can send you money. And then you're going to have a wallet. So the wallet is going to be a compilation essentially of lots of different addresses, that belong to you. So wallet and address are not the same thing. So again, a wallet is just when you start an account, you download Electrum, or you open an app on your phone, you're going to create a wallet essentially at that time. And within that wallet, there are going to be a number of different addresses that can be used as deposit addresses. And so this is an example of an address down here. So understanding too that there's different address structures for different cryptocurrencies. So for Bitcoin addresses will be, this is about 36 characters in length. It will only start ever with a 1, a 3, or a BC1. So this is what we refer to as a legacy wallet, since it starts with 1. It's the OG of cryptocurrency, or Bitcoin addresses rather. And so we even had, this is really important too, just for law enforcement to be aware of, because we had an instance of a police department bringing what they thought was a wallet on a thumb drive for us to see what we could do with. This was a couple years ago, because they thought it was a Bitcoin address, and it ended up being a Microsoft Windows license key, because they weren't familiar with the structure of how Bitcoin addresses work, or how any of this works. So important to know. And then once you start, you generate your wallet. The first thing that happens behind the scenes that you're not going to see in this cryptographic process is it's going to generate what's known as a seed. And so a seed is, this is an example of a seed generation in Electrum wallet. You create your wallet, it's going to generate a seed. This seed is going to be a phrase of between 12 and 24 words typically, but you can, for some wallet applications, you are able to add, an extra word here or there. And so this seed phrase is hugely, hugely important, because if you lose the password to your wallet, if you, for whatever reason, say your wallet is installed, so you have Electrum installed on your computer at home, something happens to your computer, you want to be able to restore your funds, this seed is what will allow you to do that. So you can go to any, theoretically, there's some restrictions here and there, always exceptions to the rules, but essentially you could download Electrum on any other device, input your seed, and you basically at that point are restoring your wallet. So it's generating new public-private key pairings, and it is restoring your funds. So if you lose this seed and you don't have the password, your funds are gone forever. Can you change the number? If I didn't like the word tiny, could I change that word? No. If I didn't like the word stamp in the third position here, can I move it to the first? No. So it has to appear in this particular order. And that's why for law enforcement, you'll see seeds written down in ledgers that have a very particular order. And if law enforcement is able to recover this seed, theoretically, we would be able to then gain access to that suspect's account, given that we have legal authority to do so. So seeds are very important, and we'll talk about that in terms of seizing funds a little bit later. But first I wanted to go through quickly the main ways that you can obtain cryptocurrency. You can also think about this from a ransomware standpoint, since ransomware is becoming pretty commonplace, unfortunately, these days, and there's new iterations, new strains, new elements to a lot of different ransomware attacks. So that leaves a lot of companies or individuals saying, how can I obtain cryptocurrency? Where do I go to first? And these are the 4 ways. We're not going to talk about mining for the sake of time, But exchanges, we'll see in a second, are going to be the number one way, the most common way that people like you and I are going to obtain cryptocurrency. You can also go to peer-to-peer exchanges, or you can just buy and sell literally from one person to another. Excuse me, but there are some exchanges that will actually just set up this peer-to-peer. They'll basically facilitate these transactions for you. And then we have ATMs. And so ATMs are now called kiosks in the crypto realm. But you guys might have seen some in your area, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So an exchange, what is an exchange? So this is the most common way for individuals, anybody, to purchase cryptocurrency and then also to cash out. So we don't, and this is what, we can talk about this in length too at some point, the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency aficionados say that, we're operating in fiat now and we're thinking about what one Bitcoin is worth in fiat dollars, but in the future, we're only going to be working in cryptocurrency. So, everything will be able to pay for everything with cryptocurrency, blah, blah, blah. That's not the point, or that's not the reality that we live in right now. So we have to, even criminals, if they want to spend all the illicit gains that they've received from whatever they're doing with regards to cryptocurrency, they have to cash out. And so exchanges are a popular way to do that. You can think of an exchange as something akin to a large bank. It's basically a business that enables customers to purchase cryptocurrency with fiat, trade in cryptocurrencies. So you can chain hop, you can go from Bitcoin to Monero, you can go from Dogecoin if you wanted to Ether, and so on and so forth. So it basically just allows you to hold funds in an account owned by an exchange, so that you can even deposit US dollars into it. You can buy tokens. There's lots of different things you can do with exchanges. Where it becomes crucial for law enforcement is knowing if you're dealing with an exchange that's based in the United States or an international exchange. Because here in the United States, even though our government and no government right now recognizes cryptocurrency as a fiat, so in other words, it's not backed by our federal government, it still is held to FinCEN regulations, SEC regulations, CFTC regulations. So what those are essentially are called KYC, or Know Your Customer, and then KYT, or Know Your Transaction Laws. So what that means is that for any exchange operating in the United States, so that would be Coinbase, Gemini, Kraken, and there's so many different exchanges, but if they're headquartered in the United States, they have to collect by law certain information about the customers who are creating an account with them. And so that includes a driver's license, so you'll take a picture of it front and back. It'll take a selfie of you, so a still picture, but we know those can be faked. So now what they're doing is they'll have you basically take a video of you moving your head from side to side. You will input your real name, real address, and a real bank account. So you have to be linked to a fiat bank in the United States that is approved by the exchange that you're dealing with. So if you bank with a small bank in the United States that doesn't have a large presence, you might not be allowed to open basically an account on these exchanges. International exchanges, depending on where they are obviously subject to any rules and regulations of that country. So Western countries are going to have similar KYC rules and regulations, but a lot of other countries don't. And so it becomes one where if you're a criminal and you are, if you're basically a criminal and you are interested in cashing out, you're probably not going to do that at a US-based exchange. Surprisingly, some still do, which is great, because us as law enforcement, we can send a subpoena to the exchange, and then we can get tons of useful information from that. So what types of information could we get from law enforcement, or from a law enforcement subpoena? Includes all of the information that I mentioned. So we get back anything that they use to register the account, including any and all transactions that they've made within the exchange itself. So whether you're swapping crypto for crypto or whether you're purchasing fiat, and then when you're sending it out or receiving funds, we'll get that information as well. So it's very, very useful and key to our investigations. So these are just some of the exchanges that you'll see pop up. There are so many more. This is just a very small drop in the pool. But Bittrex, Coinbase, Gemini, Kraken, these are the ones you'll see the most. And then on the international stage, Binance is probably financing most of the world's criminal activity at this point. Bitfinex is right up there too. Huobi, the same thing. And then Polonius. Polonius used to be on this side of the graph. It used to be a domestic exchange, and then it decided once all the KYC rules and regulations kicked in that they no longer wanted to be held by those rules and regulations, so they moved their headquarters, I think, to the Seychelles Islands. So again, if you are not looking to put any of your real information down for whatever reason, you can open up an account with one of these exchanges. You do run the risk, though, of having your funds stolen and dealing basically with a more, or I guess, a less secure company and things like that. So in the United States, we feel pretty secure by operating with these exchanges. So moving on from exchanges quickly, we've got cryptocurrency ATMs or cryptocurrency kiosks. And so our Bitcoin ATMs, these are kind of novel still, and they really are a physical ATM machine. You can see two examples of that here. So we've got, I can't recall which company this owns this particular one, but this one is pretty popular. And this one is a bit of an older model that really does look exactly like any other ATM that we would normally see. And so you can steal these if you want, but Bitcoin are not going to fall out of it, unfortunately. So how you use these is basically you have to have a wallet with an address already set up before you walk up to one of these machines. And essentially what you do is you can, using the keypad, basically say how much Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency you'd like to purchase with the amount of fiat. So say you want to buy 20 bucks worth of Bitcoin. So you already have your address ready to go. You'll type in your information. There are KYC regulations, not as much as the exchanges, but you will have to input some information into the kiosk. And then you insert your $20 bill, you'll scan the wallet, the address, and then it will deposit basically the Bitcoin into your account at that point. And so some ATMs will also let you cash out in terms of, so you have Bitcoin, I want to get my 20 bucks back out. That's more rare just because that would require ATMs to have lots of cash on hand, and that's obviously a risk. These ATMs, I wanted to buy one for UA and just set it up in a in a hallway at a building and just see who used it and why and all that good stuff for research purposes. They cost about 10 grand each, so I didn't have $10,000, so I did not do that. But nonetheless, you'll find these ATMs in kind of shadier places. So I know like the gas stations in the less safe parts of town. I think Tuscaloosa has two now. Huntsville, where I'm at right now, has a bunch. But you can go to coinatmradar.com and just search for your area, and it will basically populate the ATMs that have volunteered to let this site know that they have an ATM in the area. So it's not an exhaustive list, but it is useful, especially if you're law enforcement and your local law enforcement, you're seeing a lot of traffic coming and going from certain areas. This might be something to look into. And then we have peer-to-peer exchanges. So there are, like Paxful is a huge peer-to-peer exchange where you can go on the website. It operates similar to Coinbase, except when you're logged into Paxful, instead of paying Coinbase and using Coinbase for those transactions, Paxful will just set you up essentially with someone else who has Bitcoin. So if you have fiat and you want Bitcoin, it basically just facilitates that transaction between whomever has the Bitcoin, amount that you're interested in. Or you could go to one of these websites, localbitcoins.com. This is for Bitcoin, and local.bitcoin.com for Bitcoin Cash. So kind of a tongue twister. But either one is kind of interesting to go to and just look and see what people have, what they're offering. And so this is Bitcoin Cash. So it's just forked from the Bitcoin blockchain. And so you can see that this person here has two ads. cash in person. So that could be, you know, a security risk, but they're also thinking of it from their standpoint if they want to know who they're dealing with. And you can see this person identifies Winston-Salem, which is in North Carolina, and then Bellow Falls, which is in a place I don't know. So 2 different locations, which means it's probably a group of people working this. And then they're telling you how much they're willing to trade. So if you want less than $300 worth of Bitcoin Cash, this is not the person for you, but they go up to 2.5 thousand. This person down here, you can see, is just operating with small amounts of money out of LA, and they take perfect money. You'll see some of them will accept like gift cards only and things like that. So, and you can see the price that they're offering. So some have significantly upcharged for their services. So if you're willing to do this, this could be another way of more anonymously transacting, or at least cashing in and cashing out. It's definitely by far not the most popular, just because exchanges are so easy to use. And even if you don't want to give all of your information to KYC exchanges, you can go use one overseas. That does not have as much security. So looking at how to store cryptocurrencies. So we've purchased our cryptocurrencies and now we need a place to keep it. So these are our 4 options. So we can use an exchange-based wallet, which is what we just talked about, so I won't go into more detail, but basically when you open an account with Coinbase, it creates a wallet for you. You do not hold the private keys to this wallet, so you only essentially are able to, you can move money in and move money out, but Coinbase is the one that basically holds your private keys. And this is why foreign-based exchanges, since they also hold your private keys, could basically just take your money and run. In the US, there's not necessarily that fear because Coinbase and all these other companies are so large, they don't want to be shut down or investigated, so they're going to play by the rules. Exchange-based wallet is not where I would hold the majority of my funds for that reason. If I purchase Bitcoin, which I use Coinbase, so it's connected to my account, so I have my debit card linked up with Coinbase. I say I purchased $20 worth in Bitcoin, and I don't want it just sitting on my exchange-based wallet. So I'm going to choose one of these other 3 to move basically the funds to. That's a wallet that I control, and I control the private keys. So hardware wallet is, it has the reputation for being the safest. And I think it is to a large degree, but there are some concerns with, or not concerns, but things to know with hardware wallets. Software wallets are the most popular. So these are like Electrum, these are our desktop apps, these are our phone-based apps. And a paper wallet, nobody needs to use, but it is kind of fun to talk about. So let's look at software wallets first. So this, again, it can be stored on mobile devices, personal computers, anything of that nature where you can download the software and use it. And so this is an example of an Electrum, just a screenshot from an Electrum wallet. So you will hold the private keys. It'll be stored basically in a folder on your hard drive. So your hard drive, whether you're looking at a computer or it's going to be stored on the handset itself of your mobile device. And so security levels of the apps can vary. And this is what we found with the CINA grant, which was pretty eye-opening. But you think about, you can go to the Google Play Store or the Apple Store and just look for different cryptocurrency wallets, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them, which means there's going to be huge variations in who's developing them. Because again, this is not fiat currency. They're not held by any sort of rules and regulations on, like if you download the Bank of America app, you know there's going to be certain security features there. With these cryptocurrency apps, you have no clue. So you have to do your homework in terms of who the developers are, where the company is based out of, where your private keys are stored, and so on and so forth. Electrum Wallet is probably the safest, or one of the safest, most reliable desktop apps. I think they might even have a mobile option at this point too. But you can see I just created a wallet for us to see, and it's kind of, simplistic in its user interface, but you've got your receiving address. This is just one of many. You can click on the address tab here and it'll show you all of the public addresses that you can then send out. And it also has a QR code. This is essentially this address just in QR code form. And so this is much easier than trying to type in a Batch32 wallet Batch32 address. So you can just scan the QR code. You guys can all hold your phones up now if you have the camera on. And if you had a wallet app on your phone or a Bitcoin app on your phone, it would scan this and recognize it and say, hey, do you want to send this person money? Feel free to. I don't know if I have the password to this account anymore, but nonetheless, it's something that is much easier to display. And if you guys remember on ESPN Game Day, there was a student who was in the background and held up a sign that said, Mom, send me money. And it was a QR code and to Bitcoin, to his Bitcoin wallet. And I think everybody thought it was funny. So, I think he got about $10,000 out of that, just because 10,000 people send you $1, you got $10,000. So that's my fallback plan. But nonetheless, software wallets are easy to use, and that's the point. A lot of people these developers want you to use their software wallets. This is a paper wallet. This is one that I would never recommend anyone to use, other than it's fun to play with. You can generate your own. You can go to bitcoinpaperwallet.com and it'll show you just move your mouse around a bunch of times. It's A, fun to do. And B, it's basically getting that cryptographic algorithm set that's going to generate your wallet. What you don't get with a paper wallet, you don't get a seed. So it's not the same security level. It is simply just, you get a public address. So you've got your public address written here. So you've got your QR code and you have your address. And then it generates a private key as well. So you're always going to have, if you have a public address, you always have that public-private key pairing on the back end. And this is what you never want to give to anyone else, because if you, and you guys can all, again, hold up your phone and scan the QR code, the public address will pop up. And I wanted to have my students do this, and I actually did. I loaded up, it wasn't a paper wallet, but it was something similar. I loaded it up with a few bucks worth of Bitcoin and had the public address and the private address visible. And so they could race to see who could basically steal my funds the fastest, because if you have this private key, you would then have access to that person's wallet, and you can regenerate it, or restore that wallet on any device with any software, with some exceptions. So they could basically open up an Electrum wallet, scan this, get access to my funds, and then move those funds out into their own wallet. So this has many security concerns, including it's paper. So if you don't have a backup of it, you're kind of SOL. Also, paper wallets, you don't see these too much in the wild, but just think about, if you're law enforcement on the scene, are you going to recognize this as something to seize, of something that could be something of value? It could be $500,000 worth of Bitcoin stored on this paper wallet. So you just never know. And then this is what's known as a hardware wallet. And so this is, as I mentioned, oftentimes thought about as the kind of gold standard when it comes to storing cryptocurrency. But what a lot of people don't understand is that, so you have this piece of hardware, and this is the one I have and I use. This is Trezor, this is Ledger, the two main companies that create these. To use hardware wallets, it requires hardware and software to access. So you see that this is connected, and we've got a little digital interface. If this was not connected, there's no way to access this device. There's no on button. There's little buttons on the top. You can push them all day long and nothing happens. And so it does require that software component to access. It has the same key pairing. You've got your public-private keys for all the addresses. And you can store many different types of cryptocurrency. So I can have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different Bitcoin wallets stored on here, in addition to Ether, in addition to, I think, about 30 different cryptocurrencies at this point. I have about 4 on my ledger. And so there's lots of different, there's lots of flexibility with regards to storing it, and people feel safer because once this is unplugged, your private keys remain here, so nobody can move your funds out. However, you do have a seed associated with this. So theoretically, anyone with the seed can just use that to basically regenerate your account and restore your account on another platform and steal your funds. So it's not everybody thinks that cold storage is the end all be all, and it is because it's not connected to the internet. But again, if you have bad operational security, your seed gets out, you're dunzo, as the kids say these days. So again, hardware wallets are great. This is what I recommend for law enforcement seizures, simply because it's something that you can store multiple currencies on. Different agencies are going to have different restrictions in terms of who has access to this and how many wallets you can actually store seized funds on, but that's something you'll have to work out with your agency. So looking at transactions, so investigating transactions so we've gone from how to obtain it to how to store it. And now we need to look at how we can investigate different activity that we've seen. We'll just focus on Bitcoin for simplicity's sake. But essentially, because the blockchain, any blockchain is a public ledger, any transaction that is made on the Bitcoin blockchain will exist in perpetuity on the blockchain. It is publicly available. You guys can all download a copy of the blockchain yourself. I think it's quite large, so I wouldn't recommend it. But some of the apps that you use do come with basically a full copy of the blockchain, so it takes up a lot of space on your storage drive. But most don't, because it would slow down your phone and things like that. But anyways, so the transactions that are made are always going to exist. So if you come across, and you can even just Google the Silk Road, Seizure Bitcoin address, and go to blockchain.com and plug in that address, and then you'll be able to see all of the transactions ever made with that, to and from basically that address. This is a screenshot of a public block explorer. I think it is blockchain.com. And it's very simplistic, but it's literally all of the information from the blockchain that is going to be visually depicted here. You can also go to oxt.me. This one is more aesthetically appealing. WalletExplorer.com is another good one. Blockchain.com, Blockseer.com, Blockchair.com. There's so many different public block explorers out there that you can look at. So looking at just the different components of a transaction, you've got the hash. So for every, and this is a cryptographic hash, so for every transaction that is made, there is a hash that accompanies it. So it can never be changed. We have one address in this transaction sending funds to this receiving address. And you can see the amount of Bitcoin that went out is called a UTXO, unspent transaction output, because basically any address is forced spending. So we're forced spending this amount, and it's being sent to this recipient on this date. And you can see the fee that's incurred. This is the fee for basically using the blockchain. So every transaction will have a fee. The fees right now are very high because of demand and because of the price of Bitcoin. If you use a service like Coinbase or a peer-to-peer exchange like Paxful, you will also pay a Coinbase fee or a Paxful fee. So to be aware that there's different types of fees. And then so that's one transaction, and the transaction just below it has a different hash, and we've got funds going out to our target address here. So you can see the funds went from this address to our target address, and then our target address sent the funds forward. So that's how you essentially can interpret the blockchain in these different transactions. The problem is that there's no identifying information here. We don't know if this is a service. We don't know if we don't know anything beyond what we're looking at. And so that's why I highly recommend a very expensive product called Chainalysis. And I'm not here to sell you on anything, but I am here to tell you from an investigational standpoint, you will not be able to fully investigate anything to do with cryptocurrency if you do not have a proprietary software like Chainalysis. And it is the industry leader. CipherTrace is good too, but it uses some different algorithms on the back end that just Chainalysis is really the industry leader at this point. Because what it's going to show us is this is a batch withdrawal. This is most likely a service. Chainalysis will identify that for us, and we'll be able to do a ton more with regards to investigating transactions. And this is just another example of what you're looking at. So here's the transaction hash. This is all going to be the same person. It's called co-spending. And then this is going to a particular output. There's different heuristics we can use to determine which is the intended recipient and which is a change address going back to the original sender. And all that means is that it's the same thing when you go to the store. You purchase $6 worth of something, you hand them a $10 bill, they give you $4 and change back. The same thing happens on the blockchain. But without knowing that, you miss a lot of these investigative kind of tips and tricks. So how to then say we know we have our target wallet, how can we confiscate the funds? So if you have a seed phrase, you're golden. The seed phrase can never change though. So I've seen instances of, so say you arrest an individual, you have the seed phrase, you have the legal authority to seize the funds, so you use the seed phrase to regenerate, or in other words, repopulate their account on your own computer. So all you've done at that point is you've accessed the suspect's account. Some law enforcement agencies miss the point that they think at this point they've confiscated it because they have their seed phrase, they have the suspect's seed phrase, and now they've gained access to the account. But you haven't confiscated it at that point, you've just accessed it. And so say bad guy or gal gets out of jail, they have the seed phrase too, and they realize they can access their account. And they realize that you haven't moved the funds, they move the funds out of there and they're gone forever at that point. So you won't be able to use the seed phrase to do anything. So seed phrase is great, but you have to remember that second step is actually move them into a wallet controlled by your agency. So the seed phrase could be located in a Word or text file or physically written down. I've seen it in a number of different ways. And then to keep in mind the number of seed words to look for. Sometimes you'll see smart criminals write down 11 words and there's one missing because that's the one they remembered. So people necessarily aren't going to memorize 12 seed words, but they could memorize one. And if they know that the word they've memorized goes in the third position, then that basically thwarts law enforcement too. If you don't have the seed phrase, you could use, if you have the private key, so if you have access to their computer and you can image it and maybe grab that private key file and the password that goes to that account, you should be able to then access the account and then move the funds and confiscate it. There are some differences that we've found just depending on the software, but nothing too much to really talk about at this point. So just briefly to give you guys an idea, now that we have a better background of what cryptocurrency, what the crypto world is and how we can interact with it, the research question that my team tackled was, if we only had the suspect's phone, what could we recover in terms of digital forensic artifacts that would then allow us as law enforcement to seize the funds? And so for phase one, which was last year, we had, there were some issues with Cellbrite and Android, so we were only able to really look at apps on iOS phones. So we had 4 Bitcoin apps, 4 Ether apps, and then 3 Monero apps. And so Monero is a dark coin, which means it has its own blockchain, so it's its own native coin, but it obscures the transactions in such a way that when you're looking at their version of the public block explorer, there's no way really to tell which payments are intended payments, which are just obfuscated, basically white noise. So it becomes very difficult. And so criminals are being encouraged more and more to move into the dark coin realm like Monero, because it basically thwarts our ability to track and trace them. So that's why I wanted to focus on dark coins too, because if we could collect information, forensic information off of a phone and we could seize the funds, then we don't need to worry about tracking and tracing anything at that point. And then in phase 2, we expanded, we are able this year to include Android. So we're looking at Bitcoin again for different wallet apps, just because Bitcoin is king. Most people still are interacting with Bitcoin. But then we also have Litecoin, which I think is the number 2 or 3 crypto right now in terms of market share. And then we have Zcash, which is another dark coin. And this is an interesting, as a whole, it operates a little bit differently than Monero, but it is still considered a privacy coin. So we are in the process of this. So I don't have any results to share with regards to phase 2, but for phase 1, in one app for every every type of cryptocurrency, we were able to get enough information to be able to recover the funds. So in some cases, we recovered a seed. In other cases, we were able to recover the private key and the password. We also found some interesting things for anybody interested or familiar with the digital forensic world, that some of the apps were actually caching different pictures from, essentially Snapchat and other apps do this too. When you're using your app and you're just in your daily activities, the app in the background is basically taking screenshots of your phone and storing it in the cache database. So you don't know it, it doesn't show up in your pictures on your phone or anything like that. But if you use the app enough, the chances are, or the chances increase that it could capture, maybe a private key or the seed or a transaction or something that could give you more information. So that was kind of an interesting secondary finding for our study. And then just to kind of wrap things up, because I know we're about coming up on time, it's very important, no matter if you're law enforcement or private sector companies or an individual to who's worried about ransomware attacks or whatever the case might be, is to have a plan before you need one. And everybody says that, but it is so true. I've seen it firsthand with ransomware victims and everything else, where if you don't understand how to seize, or I'm sorry, if you don't understand how to obtain cryptocurrencies safely, and you don't know how to store it safely, and have a plan to seize it. If you're law enforcement, there's steps. So my project, the CINA project, one of our deliverables is basically a step-by-step guide on how to seize it in different situations. Have a plan for identifying high-risk customers, have a plan for trying to identify and set thresholds for concerning amounts and transactions. So you're going to be concerned about transactions more than $10,000, similar to what our regulations are today for fiat. But definitely have a plan before you need one. So that includes standard operating procedures, guidelines, and then the last one's always fun: basic levels of understanding in upper management. And so we're all I'm probably in the same boat in terms of we're trying to just basically spread knowledge and awareness so that when the time comes, you won't be caught completely unaware and completely in a panic mode, because you're trying to figure out, how do I set up an Electrum account? How do I do this? How do I do that? Do I have to create a Coinbase account now? Man, it takes a couple days for that to get verified, so on and so forth. So, and then the last concluding thought, if you're doing any sort of investigation, law enforcement or private sector, for tracking and tracing, really nothing is going to let you succeed in your investigation as much as the proprietary software. And that is unfortunate because it is a very high cost barrier to entry. So I will stop there, and thank you so much.